As I mentioned, we don't really have a sermon per se this morning, but I do have a text, and this is the text that I will actually be reading in 2 or 3 weeks when we talk about the vow that has to do with service. And it's the 25th chapter of Matthew, where Jesus talks about the importance of serving those who are in jail, those who are without clothes, those who are hungry, those who are lost. And at the end, they say to Jesus, "And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In the early 1990s, some of you were around at that time and will remember this. Our church found itself in a pivotal moment in its history. We were meeting in a mid-sized building southeast of here, kind of hidden in a neighborhood, and we had found this land. We had purchased it. We were waiting 3 years to begin construction because we didn't have that much money. And we had raised the land, and we're taking 3 years to pay it off. And so we literally waited 3 years just to begin construction here. And we started asking ourselves this question: what kind of church do we want to be when we grow up? I remember one night in a meeting, somebody raised their hand and they said, "Now, why is it that we are building this church? Is it just because we want more parking places? We didn't have enough in our old location. Or we want more comfortable pews?" And I thought that was the right question. Why are we moving, relocating, and building a new church? And so as we thought about it, we gained great clarity in terms of the answer to that question. First of all, we were not doing it for ourselves. Most of us, looking back, we didn't think we were young at the time, but looking back, we were young. We had young children, most of us. But we said very clearly that we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing it for our children and our children's children, the generations yet to come. That it wouldn't be worth the effort, the energy, the sacrifices to make that move, that relocation, if we were doing it only for ourselves. At the time, we talked about our grandchildren, but I think most of us, I see the Stevensons out there, I'm looking right at them. We couldn't conceive of having grandchildren at the time, but now most of us do have grandchildren. The other thing we said is that we're doing this so that we may become a serving congregation. That's what we want to do and be when we grow up as a congregation. We want to be a church whose DNA is literally defined by what we do for others, the transformation of our lives while we help transform other lives, and ultimately the transformation of the community. The transformation of the community. So even before we moved, we created a remarkable program called Esperanza para los Niños. If you speak Spanish, I hope I said that right. I'd like to think that I speak Spanish. That's about all I speak. But it means hope for the children, and it combines two of the passions that we have in this church: our commitment to serve others and our commitment to children and their families. The Andean Rural Health Project in Bolivia was our sponsor for a number of overseas missions. These were our first overseas missions. Most of those were led by Lynn Randall. It was a program that addressed rural health needs of children in Bolivia. It was a remarkable program in the lives of the indigenous people of Bolivia, but it changed us as well. That was the program that began to change our DNA. That program lasted for a number of years, 2 or 3 years after we came to this location. And finally, we closed that chapter in our history, but we opened a new one called Project Hope. We don't have enough time today to talk about Project Hope, but I'll just say to you, most of you know, it is a remarkably comprehensive program designed to help people who are living at the margins of poverty. And through the years, so many families have been impacted by Project Hope. It mentors and tutors people in every aspect of their lives. And then, Project Hope. I need my notes to make sure I don't leave anything out. Then Project Hope engendered Project Next Generation, the same program for teenagers. The Vote mission team that has been to South America, has been to Poland, has been all around the southern United States with taking ministry to others, especially with regard to giving eyesight to those who can't see, their eyeglass ministry. Quincy's Quest, a mentoring program in the elementary schools surrounding us. School on Sunday, a tutoring program on Sundays. Our counseling ministry aimed at families with children who are in crisis. And our remarkable disaster response team, I saw Janet Bell Odom come in, the largest, I've talked about this, the largest in North Texas and surely one of the largest in all of America, Methodist disaster response teams over the last 10 or 15 years. Every fire, every tornado, every hurricane, every flood, within probably a 300-mile radius, our team has been there to serve. But the most obvious, what I call the signature mission that came out of Project Hope and the commitment of this congregation was a project called House on the Corner. And here's how it happened. After we closed out Esperanza para los Niños, we started meeting in a small group on Tuesday mornings for breakfast, 6:30 in the morning. We met almost 6 months, I think, every Tuesday morning. And our question was, what will be the next big thing we do in missions in terms of serving others? And we quickly adopted a goal, which was to galvanize at least 1,000 individuals in this congregation around an experience of hands-on ministry. So we don't have time for me to talk about all the different things we dreamed up, but we eventually circled back around to this idea. Let's build a habitat-type house. But what made it extraordinary to this day, let's build it on our property. That way, we can own it as a congregation, as a community. We can get a lot of people involved. So I made a phone call, and you see this on the back of your community. I made a phone call to Clyde Rupert, and I said, Clyde, we want to build a house. We want to do it on the corner, and all of this is important. We want to gift a family with the opportunity to get sweat equity and have a home and a future. We want to make a difference in the Douglas community, one of the oldest historic parts of Plano, Texas. But I said the primary mission is to change the lives of 1,000 Christ United Methodist members by putting a hammer or a paintbrush or a saw in their hands. And Clyde Rupert, I really think nobody else in this church would have understood this mission as clearly as Clyde did. He understood it, he adopted it, he lived it head to toe. When we finished that first house on the corner 14 years ago, Clyde created these, I call them faux granite placards with the name of every person who had worked on that first house on the corner. It was in the old sanctuary, the narthex to the south, and that east wall had over 1,000 placards. They looked like stones with 1,000 names on them. It was a remarkable accomplishment, and I think that by the time that happened, the DNA of this church was set forever. We are going to be a serving church, transforming our own lives while we transform other lives, and with the ultimate goal of transforming our community. Today, we celebrate 13 years, 13 houses. It is the closing of a chapter for a number of reasons that I can't go into this morning. We're going to close out this particular chapter in our church's history of serving. But I promise you, just as we did 13 years ago with all of those breakfast meetings, 6:30 on Tuesday mornings, we have another group hard at work, brainstorming, creating that next chapter in the remarkable serving history of Christ United Methodist Church. So today, we give thanks to God. We celebrate all of the houses. We celebrate all the families that have inhabited those houses. We celebrate this 13th house and the family that will receive a home today. And we give thanks for this community, a community transformed, and the ability we've had, the gift that God has given us to transform the community in which we live.